Welcome to today's edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. On the podcast with me today is Douglas Blair, and he's the news producer and a podcast host for the DailySignal. On today's show, we're going to be talking about Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter and what that means for free speech and you and I. Coming up next.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, Douglas, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Listen, there's always a lot happening in the news today, but there's no doubt that this is a humongous story. I actually spoke about it a little bit last night with your colleague, Kara Frederick from the Heritage Foundation. But right in the middle of this show, I mean, the news broke that it's done. It's a done deal. Twitter is now, or Elon Musk is now the owner, or private owner of Twitter. What does this mean for free speech, in your opinion?
Well, Carl, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. But what this means for free speech is that free speech is going to win. I mean, I think Elon Musk has proven time and again that he views free speech as one of the most important issues of our time, and that Twitter, in its long history of censoring conservatives, has not been standing up for those values. I think Elon Musk, in his position, is now probably going to try and focus on bringing free speech back to the platform. He's already said he's going to try to inspire trust back in that Twitter is not going to censor people. He's going to specifically and very importantly reveal the algorithms for how Twitter decides what stays on the platform and what goes. I think that all of these things, especially with him at the helm, are going to probably restore faith in the platform, that it's not just going to be this left-wing censor machine that gets rid of content that leftists on Twitter don't like.
Okay, so what do you think this means for other social media sites? Is there going to be, in your opinion, a cascading effect where all of these libs are trying to censor conservatives, libertarians, whomever loves freedom and free speech? It seems like the left is trying to censor. What type of cascading effect do you think Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter will have on the rest of social media?
I think it puts them on notice. I don't think that they can just get away with it anymore because they have this massive partner in censorship. I think Facebook's going to have to watch about this. Instagram's going to have to watch about it. YouTube, of course, is going to have to watch what Twitter does, because I think for as much censorship as those other platforms engaged in, it was Twitter that regularly received the brunt of the media attention for kind of going out and taking definitive action. I mean, when President Trump was banned in 2020, I think that was sort of this watershed moment where a lot of people recognized the absolute power that these social media platforms have over the public discourse. So, I mean, I think that he's recognized, and he even made this in his statement, that this is a new digital public square, right? You can't just say, oh, it's no big deal that you get censored on these platforms. Your reach is completely destroyed if you're not able to access these places. So I would hope, and I think that it sort of indicates that, this is being taken seriously, that once these platforms recognize a free speech model like Elon Musk's is going to work, that a lot of people are going to be pro-free speech on these platforms, they'll start to take notice and maybe change their algorithms and change the way that they moderate content as well.
You know what? And I don't think that's an overstatement, Douglas. The fact that Twitter is basically our nation's public square. I mean, it's a global public square as well, but there's so many people on social media today that it's not like 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So many people get their news from social media that it's absolutely powerful. Just as you mentioned, the fact that Twitter was able to remove Donald Trump completely off of Twitter is insane to me. Not to mention his 80+ million followers and the influence that they would have disseminating information on Twitter. So, I mean, this is massive. This is huge. And I don't think it can be overstated. I don't think Republicans, correct me if I'm wrong, Douglas, but I think Republicans, except for people that are younger like yourself, tend to be a little slow to the party, and recognizing how important these social media companies have become, big tech has become, and so let's just get your take on that. Are we behind the ball as a conservative movement when considering the impact that social media has? I'm glad this happened with Elon Musk, but I don't see a whole heck of a lot of Republicans even talking about this issue.
Well, I mean, I think you answered your own question. The fact that we're not talking about this as conservatives, the fact that we had to have Elon Musk buy Twitter to fix the problem kind of indicates that we were always behind the ball on this. The radical left was successfully able to infiltrate every single big tech platform. It was successfully able to take them over and mold them in their own images, right? Facebook used to be this idea where you would chat with grandma about, the flowers that she bought on Thursday.
Right.
And now it's, if you say anything about Donald Trump, we're going to take you down. Twitter used to be, I'm going to get my news here. And then it was Twitter recognizing that it could actually curate the news that you received and get rid of quote unquote misinformation. Conservatives are way behind the ball on this, but we are starting to recover. Obviously, we've seen that Elon Musk's commitment to free speech is going to do that, but we're not going to have to rest our laurels there. We're going to have to make these massive changes at a legislative and an infrastructural level as well. So I'm sure you spoke with Kara about this, but the idea is that there are certain common sense principles that we could put into place that might help this problem, one of which is transparency. Elon Musk has already said he's going to reveal those algorithms. That is so crucial because a lot of the time what we'll see with these social media platforms is that they will hide behind those algorithms and ban people and say, well, we couldn't do anything. It was the algorithm that did it. It's very strange how those bans seem to only go in one direction.
Isn't it?
Even when you can see that there are people on the left who are making far worse and far more vile claims and far more vile statements, but they seem to be able to stay on these platforms without any problem. So if you have transparency and you're basically forcing these companies to reveal what they're doing and how they're doing it, it becomes a lot harder for them to pretend that this is just some unbiased moderation. That's just one of a million different policies that we have in our toolkit. It just requires the will and the follow through to actually put them into place.
Okay, you spoke, just following up on the algorithms, I can tell you from personal experience. So my numbers on Twitter, I got to the point where I was getting probably anywhere from averaging 700 to 1,000 new followers weekly. And then this was about 3-4 years ago, and it stopped. My numbers have not grown since. As a matter of fact, when the numbers just literally stopped and froze, I was at 15,000 followers, and I just started getting active, and it just started growing like crazy. And so I was doing pretty well, projecting to have God knows how many followers within the next 6 months and a year, and it stops. And then one day I'm getting ready to tweet, Douglas. I'm looking at my phone. I can't remember what I was going to tweet. And literally in front of my eyes, I watched them wipe away. I think it was about 2,000 followers. And I'm like, what? And then a couple of years later, it happened again. This was right over a year ago. I watched the numbers just decrease 3,000 followers. So not only had I not gained any followers in several years, they wiped out some of the followers that I had. And I'm like, man, what an unfair advantage the left has. And I honestly, not only was I mad at them, I was mad at the right because I'm thinking, why the heck have we not done something about this sooner? You spoke of the algorithms and you spoke of the transparency. And this stuff is obviously important. And again, I just go back to this has to be a conversation that we have to have. I know conservatives like private business, but these people, big tech, they're not operating within the realms of the Constitution, in my opinion. So we have to play by a new set of rules, don't we?
Well, there's, one rule in particular that I think a lot of conservatives are looking at is something called Section 230.
Right.
Section 230 is this very archaic piece of legislation. If you can imagine AOL Instant Messenger and going online to check on your Neopet, that's when this was, this rule was made. It was the very beginning of the internet. And it's basically not been updated since, even though the landscape around the internet and around digital technology has changed super radically. So one of the things that we propose here at the Heritage Foundation is that we think that that Section 230 needs to be reformed and updated to modern times because, again, tech companies are taking advantage of the fact that the legislation is out of date. Like I said before, AOL Instant Messenger was the name of the game back when this law was put in place, and that's just not reality anymore. So if you can make that law more reasonable, if you can make it more applicable to modern standards and to what the actual social media landscape and digital landscape looks like now, I think that would really help alongside a lot of these other things like transparency, like holding these companies accountable for when they unfairly censor conservatives.
Right. And then you talked about the way that news is curated, the way that we receive news. I think this makes Americans more divisive. And I think that was the goal of the left and, of these big tech oligarchs, if you will. I'm getting different types of news that my neighbor may, and I'm surrounded by liberals. I'm in my neighborhood. I'm not, so I'm getting different news than they're getting. I do my own research, so I'll go search for things I know that they won't. They're not in this, they're not in this business. And so whatever Twitter allows them to see is the only thing that they're going to see. And doesn't that make for a more hostile environment? I mean, Americans against Americans?
Absolutely. And I mean, that is the scariest reality here is that we have two Americas. I know that phrase gets thrown about a lot, or this idea there's a conservative America and a liberal America, but it really is true. I was chatting with some of my friends back home. Cards on the table. I'm from Portland, Oregon, so I have a lot of liberal friends myself.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
The one conservative.
I'm from Cali, so I get you.
I feel you. So the idea being, though, that they don't exist out, or the world doesn't exist outside of their echo chamber, right? So if they're not watching CNN or MSNBC, it's not real. It doesn't exist. And that is not a place where you can have a country. I think you were talking about how you consume media outside of the bubble, right? You're not just watching Fox. You're not just watching Newsmax. You're probably also watching CNN to understand what they're saying, NPR, all these other outlets. I mean, that's kind of what we need to do, right? Like big tech has sort of made its profit off of dividing Americans into these camps, banning, censoring conservatives and letting liberals and leftists run wild. We need to get to a point where all viewpoints are valid. And to get back to the sort of idea we were talking about originally, Elon Musk made a really poignant statement when he was announcing that he was buying Twitter, where he basically said, I hope that my harshest critics stay on the platform because that's what free speech is all about. I don't want an echo chamber. Nobody else should. It shouldn't be the reality that we acknowledge that we just basically exist in a conservative space or a liberal space. It should be, I have friends who are conservatives. I have friends who are liberals. I disagree with the liberals, but that's fine. We can talk. We can have these conversations. It shouldn't be that Twitter basically creates an echo chamber and then bans everybody else from it, especially with the amount of reach that it has.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, that's the case. Elon Musk also talked about spam bots. What's the significance of spam bots?
Well, spam bots are basically these accounts that aren't real people. They are these manufactured accounts that either just repeatedly post content over and over and over again. You'll see this a lot with foreign language sort of intel groups where they'll sort of post the same thing over and over and over again in either Russian or Chinese or Farsi. And it creates this sort of platform where people don't feel as if the moderation is actually working. So I don't think it's necessary that we have a Wild West out there where there's literally zero moderation. Of course, there's content like child pornography or actual violence that needs to be curbed, right? But you can have some form of moderation that starts to cut down on these things. And Twitter has not done a very good job of making sure a lot of these spam accounts are able to be kicked off of the platform, right? I think one of the things you'll start to see is these fake platform or these fake accounts will start to spread this type of like vile content, or it'll just be spam like he mentioned. And that again it makes people lack faith in Twitter. So I think Elon Musk is saying that this is one of the ways that he's going to make the platform better. I do think, however, it's more important to focus on the free speech element because that's really where I think a lot of the perception that Twitter is not a trustworthy platform is coming from.
Yeah, I do really appreciate that. Listen, I was not a big Elon Musk fan. I didn't pay that much attention to him. I'm not into electrical vehicles. I know people love them. People that drive his Teslas say they're super fast or super cool. But in my mind, I'm always sitting there thinking, well, listen, they're not really. If you love them for the sake of loving them, so be it. But please don't virtue signal. They're not doing anything to clean the environment. And that's been my take. And so I've kind of kept Elon Musk at a distance. But I can't, again, overstate just the simple fact that he's talking about free speech. He has so many Twitter followers, so many people that look up to him, not just in America, but obviously around the world. And this guy has become a giant if indeed he sticks to everything he said for free speech, which is really cool and really scary at the same time, Douglas, because I don't want to put all of my trust for free speech in America on one man, Elon Musk. Your take?
No, you're absolutely right. And I think it's important that we know that Elon Musk should not be our salvation. Like, the idea that a billionaire who, at the whims of the market or whatever, decided to buy a company really indicates the dire straits that free speech is in, because we should have never gotten to this point. The idea that we need to have a billionaire step in to say, no, free speech is important, means that something in the civics in this country has gone seriously, seriously wrong. There used to be this expectation that as an American company, you would accept American values and you would propagate those values both domestically and abroad. We've now seen that a lot of these companies actually feel as if America got it wrong, that free speech is a bad thing, that, being proud of your country isn't good, that we're a no good, racist, bigoted place. And that's a really unhealthy way to run a country. So again, I think that what Elon Musk is doing is really solid. It's really good. I'm very happy that he did it. But it kind of reveals the rot behind the curtain, that we need to actually start taking these issues seriously, and we need to rein in big tech companies. And again, like I mentioned before, there are lots of solutions to do that. Reforming Section 230 is a great place to start, updating our laws so that they actually apply to a modern tech landscape, making companies be transparent and forcing them to reveal these algorithms that they use to sort of hide behind when they ban conservatives for these really ridiculous reasons, that they allow liberals to say horrible, awful things on the platform, but stay on. These are just really two things that would, I think, start to make a difference in how we view big tech and how our relationship with big tech works, because big tech's not going anywhere. It's not, the power of big tech isn't going anywhere. If anything, it's probably going to get worse based on the fact that technology is getting more and more advanced and our lives are becoming more and more interconnected with it. So this is a problem that definitely needs a solution, and it needs a solution right now.
One of the things that big tech censorship has done, in my opinion, is promulgated the normalization of leftism. And what I mean by that is you can go on these big tech sites and you see all of this left-wing garbage, whether it's a man can be a woman and vice versa, but there's no counter arguments because these people are being censored. So you get the sense, if I'm a lefty or if I'm a Democrat, I get the sense that, oh, this is the prevailing view. This is the social norm because I'm not getting any other information about traditional American values. I want to get you to comment on that. And then I want to go back to this issue of moderation and shared values. You struck a chord with me, so I want to talk about that, but your take on what I just said.
Absolutely. So, I mean, they did a study, and I don't have it in front of me to sort of give the exact numbers, but what they said is that if you basically made Twitter a congressional district, it would be D plus 46 or something like that. It would be insanely left. It would be almost like the most progressive place in the country, which is absolutely true. I mean, Twitter is an echo chamber. I've used that word before, and I've heard other people use it. It's very apt. It is an echo chamber for progressive ideology. If you were to go on Twitter and assume that that was the prevailing narrative about America, you would think that COVID was still murdering like 5 billion people a day, that, everybody is gay or transgender, and that everybody wants kids to be learning about that stuff, which is just not true. So while it's not representative of America as a whole, it is still hugely influential on the public discourse, which is why it's so important that we sort of have a grasp on it. I think, again, though, that this is something that we maybe need to look at as an idea that we should probably decouple ourselves from big tech. I mean, the fact that Elon Musk is having to be the one that takes over and makes big tech better means we probably should be looking at other places to get our news and get our social connections, right? I mean, we used to live in a world, and maybe I'm just being like, kind of old fashioned here, but we used to live in a world where you went to church, you went to your social group, you went to all of these other things offline to create these social connections. And the social connections that you get online are just not real. They're not, I'm sorry, like people will say that their relationships that they've made on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or YouTube are just as real as a real relationship. I just don't buy that. I think that one of the things that we're starting to see is this collapse in social cohesion, and that comes a lot from the fact that a lot of our relationships are now online. They're based in the web, and that's just not what we're meant to do. Human beings aren't meant to do that.
It's such a good point, and I think if I could dovetail on that point, I think this is why people are so mean on Twitter, and I've been guilty of it. I've been guilty of it myself. And then I try to check myself like, whoa, calm down. Would you talk that way to someone in person? And sometimes I would, I'm not going to lie. But often, but oftentimes, I wouldn't. And I know that people come, I've had some vile things like any conservative would have said to me, online. And it's like, whatever, block you, so on, etc. But I'm sitting here thinking, with this person, let's pretend like social media didn't exist and I just met this person. Would they speak to me that way? Would they have a regular conversation with me? I think you're right. And that social media has made people, in my opinion, meaner. It's dumbed down a society to a degree, and it's made people more empty because there aren't those social connections, traditional social connections from the people that totally rely on social media for quote unquote friends.
Yeah, no, I think that it is an interesting case because when you don't have the person in front of you physically, it's a lot easier to be vile and hateful and terrible. You hear all the time about conservatives receiving death threats. And to be fair, you also hear about leftists receiving death threats as well, which I think is completely inappropriate. But when you are only looking at an avatar behind a screen, it is very easy to dehumanize a person. It's not it's not an actual living, breathing person in front of you. It's just bits and bytes and ones and O's, right? Like it's not a real thing. And I think that does create this sort of narrative in your head that you can say, oh, well, this person is just evil incarnate. They're a conservative and they hate gays and they hate blacks and they hate all of these things that I hold very dear to me. So I can be horrible and terrible back to them. Or, you basically say, what's the harm in it? Because they're not real, right? So yeah, again, big tech has basically created this monster. It's unfortunately a monster that we need to live with. I think it's something that we can try to decouple from as much as we can. But as we were talking about before, if you are banned from Twitter or you're banned from one of these social media platforms, it's a really big issue in terms of getting your reach out, right? Politicians who get banned from social media platforms see their campaigns not do very well because they're not able to reach a massive audience. So again, it's this sort of, threading the needle between existing online and existing in social media, but then also regulating and recognizing that social media needs to be controlled as a sort of necessary monster, a necessary evil. So it's a very complicated question. I think what Elon Musk is doing to sort of bring free speech back will hopefully alleviate a lot of these issues that we're seeing with big tech right now. But it's a brave new world. We're not sure exactly where this is going, but one thing is for sure, that we will need solutions, and we need those solutions sooner rather than later. Okay, so let me ask you this. The former President Barack Obama came out and he was expressing his concern about the disinformation that will be disseminated all over Twitter and these social media sites, since if Twitter is a free speech platform, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but speak to the left just going crazy, in my opinion, about Twitter just going back to a place where I felt like it was initially, but no longer is. Yeah, no, the response to this online has been mind-boggling to me, where a lot of people will say, there was one article that really blew my mind where I think it was he was some Obama staffer, where he basically said like the free speech platform that Elon Musk envisions is the dream of fascists and dictators. And I was just like, how does free speech translate to fascism and dictatorship? You'd think those things were sort of like polar opposites. But this is what they believe. They genuinely, on the left, believe that if you allow information that they dislike, and it's not even inaccurate, they use this term misinformation, but that's just not true. It's never describing something that's actually untrue. It's something that they dislike. If you allow that type of information to propagate online, you are a fascist and a dictator. And the only way to have a civil society is to ban wrongthink, is to ban uncomfortable or controversial opinion, where we have this all nice, cushy world where nobody disagrees and everything is just so, right? The left gets to dictate everything. And that's just, again, that's really unhealthy for a democracy, because one of the things that we need to do as a country is address these issues together. And Elon Musk, again, has said he doesn't want to ban people who would disagree with him. He wants to have them on the platform. So he wants to have this debate. He wants people to be talking. He wants people to be finding solutions to these issues together, because that's how we do it. We don't just ban speech that we don't like. We debate it. We allow it to express itself. We put it out in the sunlight, and the good ideas stay and the bad ideas go. I think Elon Musk and what we're seeing right now is hopefully a return to that. And if people don't want to deal with that, they're more than welcome to leave the platform. I just think, again, we want to keep them on the platform. We want to keep them talking and having these debates, because that's how we progress as a society.
All right. So here's the last question here, Douglas. Does the left really believe what they say? Do they really believe that we're a threat? Do they really believe that we're fascists and dictators, or are they scared to compete with us in the arena of ideas? Last question.
I believe that they do. I actually think that a lot of these leftists are true believers. Now, I do think that there are certain people in positions of power who are cynically involved in this because they know it's what's going to make them a profit. And that's also a problem. But I do think that one of the biggest issues about this is it's an ideological war. It's not a war between people who can be swayed. It's a war between people who genuinely believe that free speech and anybody associated with free speech is a fascist, who believes that anybody who believes in traditional marriage and traditional gender roles and the fact that there is no such thing as like widespread awful systemic racism is just a bad person. And I think that why it's so difficult for us to find allies in the movement is because if your entire philosophy is based on the fact that your enemy is a morally repugnant person, it's very difficult to make common cause with them. I think from conservatives' perspective, at least in my opinion, I have friends, like I've mentioned back home in Portland, who I think are just misguided. I think that they have wrong political opinions, but they're good people, right? I don't think that they're evil. Right. I just think that they're wrong in their opinions. But the problem that I have is when we're basically fighting against people who are willing to go to the lengths as censorship, banning, character defamation to get things done, to get their policy done. I mean, you can't really work with that. You can only work with people who are willing to meet you halfway. And I think that that's what's hopefully going to happen when we have more free speech on Twitter, is that we'll see that people are willing to meet people halfway. They're willing to have these conversations, and hopefully we can make a better country out of it.
All right. Douglas Blair of the Heritage Foundation, I appreciate you joining us today. It's been an interesting, fascinating conversation. God bless you for all you do in the Heritage Foundation, all of you guys do there, and on the Daily Signal, man. You have a good day. Guys, you can help me spread this information. I think this was a very important show today. I appreciate it. Douglas Blair of the Heritage Foundation coming on. He's a young gun, news producer, podcast host at the Daily Signal. These are people that spend literally their day thinking about these big issues and how to make the conservative movement advance. Sadly, a lot of Republicans, in my opinion, not enough Republicans, have paid attention to the issue of big tech. And you see where we are right now, where neighbors are fighting against neighbors because big tech decides who gets what information. It's totally insane. Or they completely censor those of us that are faith-based or conservative completely if we disagree with them. So this has been huge. So please spread the information. The way that you can do that, share the podcast, share it, like it, review the podcast even, but make sure you share it with a friend. We want to grow here. We want to definitely grow our numbers. We want to grow our reach, and with your help, we can do that. We're fighting for the everyday American so that everybody can continue to chase and or live the American dream right here in the United States. So go to Apple, go to Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Rumble is where I prefer that you watch the video, but anywhere you find audio, you can find this podcast. So please subscribe. Apple, Google, YouTube, Rumble, again, anywhere where you find podcasts. And until next time, oh, by the way, check out my website, carljacksonshow.com. Also, SalemPodcastNetwork.com is another place that you can find it. And until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.